This is Dave, and I'm here with Ethan, and together we are Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 240-inch.
This very special episode is dedicated to the memory of our beloved close personal friend, major podcast supporter, and pretty stinking majestic Weird Al fan, Joe Jaffa.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Seriously, the whole podcast is about Weird Al.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
You don't have to listen, but we're glad you are.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Now, this episode is going to be a departure from our normal routine as the Weird Al fan community lost a very special person last week.
Last Wednesday, shortly after our episode was published, news broke that our beloved close personal friend, major podcast supporter, and pretty stinking majestic Weird Al fan Joe Jaffa had passed away at the age of 33.
Joe's family shared this message via his social media profiles. Hello, friends of Joe Jaffa. This is his family. We're heartbroken to let you all know that Joe passed away on Monday. Gratefully, he died at peace, surrounded by his family. He wanted us to tell you that he did not lose his battle with cancer. He took the cancer down with him. Thanks for being his friends. We appreciate every one of you for being there for him.
Joe was a lifelong Weird Al fan and a pillar, a cornerstone in the Weird Al community. Our deepest sympathies go out to his family, his friends, and everyone he touched through humor and kindness through his much too short life.
Joe was kind, witty, funny, creative, generous, smart, courageous, patient, and brave, and it is our great privilege to have known him.
We're comforted to know that he died at peace, surrounded by those who loved him, and we think it's badass that he wanted everyone to know that he didn't lose his battle with cancer, he took the cancer down with him.
We love Joe so much, and he will be greatly missed.
Over the course of this episode, we will share some of our favorite memories with Joe, share messages recorded by our wonderful listeners who called in to help celebrate Joe's life, and we'll be joined by Joe's cousin, past guest and friend of the podcast, Rob Kutner, who asked to say a few words about Joe.
So I'd like to start out with how I first met Joe, and it had to probably be about 20 years ago. This was on the Weird Al forum, Wowway, the World of Weird Al Yankovic forum, and I remember a pretty young kid. He probably had to be in his early teens, maybe 13, 14, or 15 at most. He signed up under the name of Barney Slayer. Now, I'm not sure where he got that idea. I think it was a reference to Jurassic Park, and Barney getting decapitated.
I love that.
But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's something from his childhood. Maybe he was a big Barney fan, or maybe he wasn't a big Barney fan. I don't know. But after a few years, Joe had matured a little bit, and he asked his name being changed to Big Spoon. I'm not sure what Big Spoon means. That might be another personal reference. I don't think I ever asked him. I remember when he asked me to change the name, he said, I wanted to make sure I kept the same initials, BS, so that I knew that, so people knew it was me. But over the years, he was incredibly articulate and very well loved on the forum. And most of his posts are under the name Big Spoon, and they're a lot of fun to go back and read.
Yeah, Joe is just so smart and so funny and always had really amazing stuff to share. And I'm jealous. I was never a member of the forum. I know I would reference it from time to time, but I never was a regular poster. I actually met Joe through the podcast. I was familiar with his name, and I would see him places posting on Facebook and whatnot, but it was actually through the podcast that I got to know Joe and just became really close with him and was really able to treasure him for all that he was and all that he contributed.
Joe contributed a ton to Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast over the past 5+ years, including setting up our interview for episode 201-inch.
We'll touch more on Joe's other contributions to the podcast, but first, let's hear from that guest.
To help us celebrate Joe, Rob Kutner, Joe's cousin, reached out to us. Rob was a guest on our podcast during episode 201-inch. Along with his impressive career writing for Conan and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, he helped bring one of Weird Al's songs into existence, and he released the book Snot Goblins and Other Tasteless Tales, which features a Weird Al joke on the back cover. But most importantly, he is Joe's cousin. Welcome back to the podcast, Rob.
Thanks so much for agreeing to have me on, guys. I really appreciate everything you're sharing with the world about Joe, and really helping keep his memory and his legacy alive.
And we're really happy to have you here to help us celebrate his life, because Joe is just such an important person to us and to the Weird Al community at large. And you have a lifelong connection with Joe because he is your cousin, and I think that is so great, and that's how we met you. And Joe always was talking about you and how much, he loved you and working with you on Conan. So we just love to hear, some of your favorite memories and some of your thoughts about Joe.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it makes me a little bummed because you see what happened was I moved to Los Angeles in 2009. Well, I had been there earlier when Joe was like a little wee thing, a little wee lad. Didn't really get to know him that well. But when I moved back in 2009, 2010 to write for Conan, we really got to know each other, when he was in his teenage years, and really got to connect on all things comedy. A few years ago, I want to say like 2014, a bunch of friends and I came out with a big comedy album called 2776, which was all done independently and for charity. And we went down to Comic-Con to promote it, and we put together a zombie boy band. Including Scott Aukerman was in it, and it was from one of the songs on the album. And Joe wasn't going to Comic-Con, but he came over. He was super helpful, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
he was super helpful with like every aspect, from like researching it to helping us organize the recording labels and stuff like that, and then just schlepping things around. But in this case, a particularly Joe thing was. We had to create the costumes, so we got some old jeans for the zombies, and we had to zombify them. So he and my, at that time, 7-year-old daughter were out on our porch, like zombifying jeans, and it was like just taking it really as comic seriously as Joe would, like totally into the idea, but also like gonna do it right. And it was like him just watching him supervise my daughter, his cousin, was just like amazing. He recalled. I brought this up for him recently before his passing. He said he recalled that she wanted to use the blood to draw hearts and rainbows, and he had to steer her away from that. and then he was just a huge like booster of that album. It was very independent. We didn't have any marketing, so like Joe's been that way with all of my projects, my books and comic book and all this stuff like this. And like it's just so great in this world when someone boosts you and just like. You keep going online and seeing another thing they posted, another review in some other place, another thing like people just as go above and beyond as he did. That was part of our relationship. I think that was the way he was with everything. You guys know how much he was an Al. You might also have some inkling how big he was into like all the fandoms he was, like how right. If he was just like I'm seeing now, like we did a Reddit search. We're putting together sort of a Reddit tribute. My son who's 11, Jeremy, and he we're basically like kindred spirits. And it's one more tragedy because like my son has just fallen hard for Weird Al in probably the last year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
started coming to me talking about Weird Al, not even knowing my entire history. Did you know? I'm like, well. Actually, that brings up and so then I was like, there's someone you need to talk to. And so one of the really sweet and amazing things I'm going to remember my whole life is that about 2 or 3 weeks ago, when Joe was back at home before he went to the hospital again, we arranged with his family to come see him. And I was like, let's go see him. I don't know when I'm going to be available. So I brought my son up there so they could geek out on Al. Like they haven't gotten to do that much in person. And the amazing thing was like, this is just so great because my son, 11-year-old Cody, he would say, "Cousin Joe, did you know that so-and-so and so-and-so? Did you know that, Al did this, blah, blah?" And it was like each time he would start doing it, and I would see this look on Joe's face. And the look was this complicated emotion, which is like, yes, I know that. And yet I don't want to make I don't want to make my 11-year-old cousin feel bad. He was sort of He was like, there's no joy in my triumph.
Right.
So you can, with his signature understated style, he'd be like, did you know blah, blah, blah? And he'd be like, yeah, I knew that. yeah, I kind of knew that. And then he would add something on, like an extra detail. So it was just an amazing, like, lifetime wonderful conversation. I hope my kid remembers that his whole life. I think I will too. They just had this communing thing. We were really looking forward to going when Al goes on tour. Really looking forward to going, the three of us, to see him again, tailgating and stuff like that. But I think the two of us alligator. I think the two of us will be doing that for sure, and hopefully we'll see you and some of the other people.
Absolutely.
The other thing was, so I was saying that he was so into all the fandoms. So I think I mentioned to you privately, but like, there's an American Dad, I think, subreddit or fan group, and they're like watching Joe's favorite episodes on a weekly basis now live, and then like discussing them afterwards. Like, there's all these sort of
wonderful.
Like, isn't that sweet? There's all these sort of like candles of tribute going up across, like, I think, the world of comedy fandom. I think for all the community, the whole South Park people. He was so like into all these things. Like, I posted this on Facebook, but I would use him as a resource. Like, any question I had about things, and I'm a 25-year comedy professional, and Joe was like my like encyclopedia when I needed information or insights or especially comparisons. And then sometimes I was like, I got to really like bone up in this show. I'm going to be taking a meeting here. I haven't been able to watch all of it. He would tell me like which episodes and seasons to watch. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was like, it was amazing. It was like the spirit guide who, like, through all my comedic needs, and then we would just enjoy them and stuff. And as I said on my Facebook post as well, there was no stumping him from me or my son. I could come up with like the deepest comic cut from any decade, really, like any decade, like deep comedy cuts, and like there was never a question that he would get the reference, and that's an amazing thing too. The last thing I wanted to share was that I feel a little funny saying this because I knew that he was kind of into Al in the way that I knew he was into a lot of comedy things, but I didn't understand like quite the depth of it for a while. So he was I introduced him to the intern coordinator on Conan, and then he applied and got an internship, on his own merits. And so we got to work together for, basically like, I guess a semester, you'd say, or a quarter.
Okay.
When I was on Conan. And that was amazing, like just having him around, and we could sort of like talk about the crazy comedy stuff that was going on that day in the show. We could just sort of, hang out or have lunch sometimes. Like, that's just like another great lifetime experience. But again, about the Al thing, so that was at the time, that lined up with the time that I talked about in the podcast when I got Al to come on and write and perform lyrics for Conan's theme song. Remember, we talked about that.
Of course.
Right.
So that happened to happen during that time, and I was like, hey, I remember that Joe likes Al. It's just like, you guys want to slap me across the head with like two large fishes for my slow realization. But I was like, I think Joe kind of likes Al. Maybe I can introduce him. So I asked Al. He's like, that's fine. Can he come to the green room? So I'm bringing him down. I was like, Joe, I got a treat for you. And he's like, is it Al? I said, yeah. Wouldn't you like to meet Weird Al? He's like, yeah. And again, the same thing as the stumping thing. He's like, I've met him a few times, but that would be great. Like, he was so cool because he's met him at multiple shows and things like that, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I didn't know how hardcore he was, and it was like, he goes in there and they just sort of pick up again. It's like the two of them know each other, and it's like Joe's like connecting with him about like what's going on with his new, I think, with his new tour and stuff like that. And it was just like an awesome thing too. It was like bringing two Al pros into the same room.
Right.
So one of them's Al.
Now, I don't know if he ever told this story on the podcast, and maybe you guys know this better than I do, but I remember hearing Joe tell me a story about when he first was sick as a kid, a younger kid. Mm-hmm. I think his parents wanting to get the word to Al, and so they sort of just, put the call out, and this was before social media, I think, and just sort of like put the call out, let's make sure Weird Al knows, and let's, see if he, can do anything to help out Joe or whatever. And I guess so many people were going up to Al And he'd already like committed and done something for Joe. So many people were going up to Al. They're like, Al, there's this young boy I know who's such a big fan. And Al would interrupt them like, let me guess, Joe Jaffa. So awesome.
That's so funny because it's like the same thing. Like I sort of came to Al based on our working relationship, saying, hey, I have this cousin who's a big fan of yours, but he's really sick. Blah, blah. And like, again, like he also spared me the indignity that Joe spared my son of like, I know. I know. And I will say in recent months, before Joe's, I guess, penultimate surgery, about a month ago, I did reach out to Al and he made I guess now it's one of many he's done, but he made a really lovely and like heartfelt little video for him. And I know it was like, Joe got to watch it in the hospital. It was just like amazing for him. And then when I've told him about I've just told Al now and then what's going on, after what happened, he just responds immediately, just in his loving way.
Yeah, Al is tuned in to what's going on, and I'm sure he's hurting as much as we are when it comes to Joe and losing such a wonderful fan. I mean, Joe has always just been this wonderful. I hate to be like cliche, but ray of sunshine. I mean, I just would always be happy talking or texting or seeing Joe. And I mean, it's really made shockwaves through the Weird Al community. And it sounds like from what you're saying in the American Dad community. And I know the Invader Zim community and these other places where Joe just was such a presence and just a force to be reckoned with. It's really very noticeable with his absence right now, and it's been tough. So it just shows how much he is loved and respected by so many people.
I just wanted to sort of like a closing thought, I guess, in a way, is like I think that he was just ultimately just a fan in every way. Like a fan is his personality. Like he was a fan of all these things, and he was a fan of me, like basically as in my work, like in the same passion. He was a fan of my kids. He was always asking about my kids. He would like. As I showed you also my Facebook page, he was an incredible armpit fart player.
Really?
It sounds easy, but he was like, he could do like, I don't want to say quite scales, but he could do songs. Like he could sort of do, like everything else, he like took an incredibly ridiculous thing and took it seriously and made an art form. So he was like, we have this great video of him with my son Jeremy back when he was 11 months old instead of 11 years old, doing like, and he said name a song, and they said we said Mary Had a Little Lamb. So he plays Mary Had a Little Lamb under his armpit fart, like with his face, like he looks like Yitzhak Perlman, like he's like very serious about this while he's doing the performance, and the baby, my baby son is just cracking up and just giggling with laughter. So like he brought that sort of fan love intensity to everyone in his life and everything in his life, like including us. And so like. Like you said, the sun thing, like the warmth of that sun was just, almost overwhelming, the warmth and the coldness that it leaves behind. But, in a way, I feel like just like the sun, like his rays of light continue to like shine. And we always feel him when I see his pictures on what you guys are showing and other things when I hear an Al song, I sort of feel him there. And I think a lot of people are too. And that's kind of a good thing too.
Yeah. And Rob, the intensity and the devotion that Joe had to all these communities that I'm just finding out about now, but especially to our podcast community. I don't know if you know this or not, but a while back, it might have even been Joe's idea, but we wanted to start a Discord. And I remember that Ethan and I really don't know a lot about Discord. So we had a couple of fans reach out, and Joe basically said, just let me run it. I know what I'm doing. And we did. We trusted him because he's such a wonderful person. And I mean, I've had a lot of experiences with him on World of Weird Al Yankovic forum. I got to know him there and so forth. And he's always had that intensity and that devotion. And we basically said, go for it. And he was running our Discord, along with some other moderators, for as long as it's been up.
He was my private Redditor, honestly. Like, seriously, like, he would post things, he would find things, he would, like, do inquiries on Reddit for me. Like, he was, like, the master of that for me.
Yeah, if we needed anything on Discord, it was just like, all right, message Joe, and it was done, like, immediately, and he knew what he was doing, and it was great. We could also count on Joe. I remember He was a huge fan of the show Jeopardy because every time that there was a Weird Al mention on Jeopardy, we could count on Joe sending us a message and letting us know that there was some sort of question that mentioned Al or had an Al reference in it. So we definitely
awesome.
We thank Joe for that all the time. And we also, Joe would often, there was actually a couple of, remember, Ethan, a couple of Weird Al themed beers. And,
yes.
Joe would.
That sounds like the Joe singularity right there.
Right.
Yeah, right. It was like Joe would get his hands on these beers, and he would send these reviews to our podcast hotline about all these beers, and like well thought out, like analyzing him as he was like a professional beer taster,
right? As if he was doing it for the New York Times. I mean, it was
Right.
incredible.
He brewed his own beer. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
No, he was serious about his beer. That was another thing he was like deadly serious about. No, he started brewing it and stuff like that. He was like really into beer.
It was Joe, it was me, it was Adrian Vasquez and Steve Allen. The four of us are, I guess, beer fan Weird Al fans, and the four of us had a little group chat where whenever we would see something Weird Al and beer related, or just good beer related, the four of us would just nerd about it, and we all followed each other on Untapped, and they did a little bit more than I did, but I just sort of like watched them like all try really cool beers and recommend stuff, and that was just such another thing where Joe. There was no half measures with Joe. If Joe liked something, he was going to go hardcore.
Yes.
And he was going to, just really put his all into it. And I just love that about him.
Me too. Well, one final thing I forgot to mention, I don't know if this is known also, but he was a school teacher.
Yes.
And he's not a fan of life. And he was at Pacific Palisades Elementary, and I think 5 years, something like that, maybe something like that. And these kids just also worshipped him too. I mean, they called him Mr. Joe. I think someone has mentioned this. One of your fans, they called him Mr. Joe, and they made him a mug and stuff like that. And so another cool thing is that, like, I have a feeling they're going to remember him too. And as these kids grow up, there's going to be this whole generation going to the world that like encountered him in another way too, and got to have some of that magic.
That's awesome.
I know Joe really enjoyed listening to our podcast in the car. That was his favorite way to consume it. And I think you probably know where I'm going with this, Dave.
Yeah.
Every so often in the last year or so, we've not been able to do a podcast episode every single week. I mean, sometimes we have to take a break after doing this for 5 years. And I remember getting a message from Joe, basically like, if you're not going to have an episode, can you give me a few days notice so I know not to. Yes.
Joe didn't. He didn't drive to school because he can't drive without the podcast.
Right.
He's like, sorry, can't use the car. What's the point?
Pretty much. I'm pretty sure Joe was joking, that please text me or message me.
Yeah.
But I made sure that every time, if we had to skip a week, as soon as I knew, the first thing I would be text Joe. And he'd always say, thank you for doing this. You don't have to do this, but thank you for letting me know. So I always made sure that Joe knew ahead of time, as soon as possible, so he could plan his drive.
Oh, he's the best. Absolutely. What a guy.
Totally.
Rob, it's really kind of you to talk about Joe and share these memories with us, and we really appreciate it, and we're really thrilled that we have gotten to know you because of Joe.
Likewise.
Obviously, he put us in touch initially and brought us up to speed on snot goblins, and it's been really great getting to talk to you and remember Joe, and he will absolutely live on through these wonderful memories that we all have of him.
100%. Yeah, he really was like the center of this like solar system of like love and fandom and passion and fun that like so many people like are around, or orbiting around him, I think. And he brings us all together and still does.
Thank you, Rob. We know Joe was very special to you, and we thank you for sharing those great stories with us.
Dave and I helped Rob collect video messages from Joe's friends last week to share with Joe's family, and we want to thank each and every person who recorded one of those.
In addition to the videos for Joe's family, we invited our wonderful listeners to submit messages to the 347 Spatula Hotline to share their thoughts and memories of Joe.
The response was overwhelming and quite emotional, and we plan to share all of them through the rest of this episode. Here are the first few of them right now.
This is Serge. I just wanted to leave a message about Joe. I have been feeling a little bit guilty about grieving him because I felt like the grief isn't mine to have because I didn't know him as well as a lot of other Weird Al fans did. But he was somebody that I knew for 20 years. I remember when I first joined the Weird Al forum, it was shortly after Al announced that his parents passed away. My first connection with the Weird Al fan community was through Dave. And through Dave, I found the Weird Al forum, and I met Adrian and Jackie, a couple of other Weird Al fans, and Joe was one of them. It is very sad and very devastating when somebody who brings so much positivity and joy into this world is taken from us. They say that heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Joe is definitely a legend. He is somebody who will always be remembered for making people smile, making people laugh, and his puns. Oh my God. There was one I remember recently where he said that with the announcement that he made, Joe was just Biden his time. So that is one thing that I always remember about Joe is that he, is always making other people laugh, always making other people laugh or smile. So, Joe, even though you consider me a loose acquaintance, I still consider you a friend. We can all take some comfort in knowing that you're not in pain anymore. So, Joe, rest easy. We love you. We're going to miss you. And when you and I meet on the other side, you better have a good pun ready for me. Rest easy, Joe. Rest easy.
I never got to meet Joe. The only time I had any time with him was in doing the musical, the Albuquerque Weird Al musical that we did last year. It was just a fun fan reading. And what I can say is just that from the very beginning, Joe was in. He was fantastic to have in it. He was there on the actual day of the script reading, which not many other people were. A lot of people couldn't make it that day, but Joe made the time to be there just as a fan. And he's been a fan longer than I have. And, he's practically fan royalty at this point. And he was just so willing to work with me and to have fun with it and to just do this stupid thing that I made up and to have fun with it and to do all the silly things that I asked. And I've made a montage of the work that he did for that because that was my time with him. But he was an instant friend. From then on, I referred to Joe as my friend. And that was just because he acted so kind to me when I'm nobody. I'm somebody from Utah that he's never met before. And I've had my time with Joe was short, but I'm sorry to hear that he's gone.
We're just plain and simple guys living in an Amish paradise. Your face is real symmetrical, and your nostrils are so nice. That would explain how you messed up your face.
Charles Nelson Riley's voice pierces the moment.
You have made your wish.
Hey, Dave and Ethan. Mike Minnick here. I don't know what to say. Joe's been my friend for 20 years or more, maybe? I don't know. Going back to Weird Al forums. But our friendship was more than that. Music, movies, comedians. He always found something fun to talk about. I love Joe. And I'm going to miss him. Rest in polka, my friend.
So Rob was talking about how much Joe loved American Dad and how the American Dad subreddit is doing a screening in his memory. And it just made me think of when Weird Al recently was on American Dad singing the song Rabbitage. What an incredible day that must have been for Joe, having his
Right.
two favorite things together.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it also reminds me that not only was Joe just a big fan of American Dad, but he absolutely loved all sorts of different animated shows and, adult cartoons. And one that
Right.
comes to mind, this story always makes me laugh when I think about it. And if you remember, I think it was a couple years ago, they came out with a spin-off of the Scooby-Doo universe called Velma. And,
Right, yes.
And it was, let's say, notoriously not well liked. And
Right.
Weird Al, however, had a cameo in the show, and nobody really knew where in the show it was going to show up. And Joe, God bless him, he watched every single episode just in case there was another appearance of Al, and he was reporting back to me like how difficult it was for him to get through the episodes.
Oh, jeez, poor Joe.
And he'd be like, well, they showed Weird Al's character in the background, but he didn't speak. And I was like, Joe, thank you for your service.
What a trooper. Wow. Joe.
What a guy. I love him.
I want to go a little bit back to the World of Weird Al Yankovic forum and talk about some of Joe's posts. They were always articulate and very well thought out. Whenever I would log in, I would always look forward to seeing messages from Joe. I mean, he was always very knowledgeable about anything he posted about, especially about Weird Al. And over the years on the forum, we did these things called Wowway Awards, which was a little fun, like award show that we did every year or so.
I remember you talking about these awards and how funny they were and how they really went to people who just went above and beyond and were super special to everyone in the forum.
Yeah, and some of them were pretty silly. We'd come up with different topics. In fact, here are a few of them that Joe won. He won in 2007 Most Dedicated Non-Spoiler, and Joe was very adamant about staying spoiler-free for Straight Outta Linwood. So, I remember we had an entire forum where all we did was talk about spoilers, and Joe refused to go in there because he wanted to remain totally spoiler free. So he won that well-deserved award in 2007. We also had on the forum this secret off-topic sub-forum for people who contributed and helped support the forum, and it was called Gary Coleman, after, of course, the actor. It was an inside joke. There are a lot of inside jokes on World of Weird Al Yankovic for you. Well, I don't remember what the thread was, but in 2010, Joe won the award for starting the best Gary Coleman thread.
I feel like you could be making this all up, Dave. It's hilarious.
I couldn't make up something like this. We also had on the forum, run by Adrian Vasquez, an underground internet radio station called Talking Taco Radio. and Adrian would play just all silly songs and whatever he wanted. And every once in a while he'd do these theme shows, and he would ask people in Gary Coleman, the subforum, to send him, different ideas and skits, and he would script them out. And they were a lot of fun. And Joe won the award for Best TTR Skit in 2010. Talking Taco Radio, TTR was the short name.
Of course he did.
Of course he did.
Anything Joe touched was hilarious and well done, so I'm not surprised there.
And there was also a whole subforum of games and things like that, and I think it was like a apprentice type of show. And Joe was on a team called the Minor Celebrities, and his team ended up winning Outstanding Achievement in Fan Parody Recorded. They recorded an actual parody for this contest, this little game show we were having. So these are just some of the awards that Joe won, and he always was an integral part of the forum.
Well, Joe not only collected a ton of very prestigious Wowway awards, Joe is also a Weird Al collector. And he was always so excited when he would get stuff. I know we have posted this photo of Joe holding up the Placebo EP, which is, a holy grail for a lot of Weird Al collectors. But not just Weird Al stuff. Joe took it a step further, and he was cataloging Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast items. And I remember him posting and asking you and I about, what is the best way to catalog it? And I think I said to Joe, I'm like, you got to ask Dave, because I'm not even that organized. I just have, piles of stuff everywhere. I don't know what I have. He was so good. He was just so good at being organized and being thoughtful and thinking ahead, and I just was always so impressed by him.
Yeah, I remember how excited Joe was when he actually landed that Placebo EP. He was very excited about it. I do remember that moment.
Dave, let's take a listen to a couple more messages we received from friends of Joe Jaffa.
Hey, this is Spencer Parks. I'm calling to, I guess, give my condolences to the whole community about Joe Jaffa. The first time I interacted with him was really not that long ago. It was for the script read that William wrote, and you could tell from how Joe was and watching his video that he was just so happy to be there and clearly thrilled to be a part of this community, which I'm sure he has been for many, 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 many years. I think I came late to knowing who he was. But in that short period of time, I feel like I got to know him. I feel like I could call him a friend. We never met in person. We only interacted through Facebook, but he was a force. He was hilarious, as you all know. He had very funny posts, very punny posts. And in addition to that, you know, we would comment on each other's posts about movies or TV shows or music or whatever it was. And I really considered him a friend and somebody who I wanted to get to know better, meet in person. And I really thought I would. I thought that would happen at some point in the future. And clearly that is not the way life always goes. And it's really hard to accept the fact that even somebody you didn't know that well, that you didn't get to meet in person, that they're gone and that you won't get that opportunity in this physical world to have that happen. And it is really hard. And my heart goes out to his entire family. This has got to be so hard on them right now. And obviously the Weird Al community and any other communities that he was a part of too, which I'm not even aware of. So Joe, we're going to miss you.
Hey, this is Alexis. I wanted to talk about Joe. I met Joe about 20 years ago on Huawei. He was always so friendly and so funny. And then like 10 years later, I moved out to California and just happened to be able to meet him in person at a variety of Weird Al events with, you know, a bunch of people from the Weird Al community. And I think I've seen him at every concert I've gone to out here. We'd meet up before a show and, you know, I can be kind of quiet and shy and maybe a little bit socially awkward sometimes. But every time I've seen Joe, he always was so nice and came up with a friendly face and made me feel so comfortable and welcome along with the rest of the fan community. And I really appreciated that. The memory that pops in my head when I think about him is when we were both singing our lungs out to Yoda at a Weird Al concert a few years back. He was sitting in the row in front of me and we and everyone and Al and everyone was just singing our lungs out and laughing and cheering and the energy was so high. And after the show, he turned around to me and he was like, man, what a great show. And it's just really cool to think about the fact that like I met him 20 years ago in this community of people where we would talk about how excited we were to go to a concert and listen to the albums and laugh, and we all have this common interest and we all get to experience it, you know, together. And I got to experience it with him in person decades later. Joe was very funny. He loved to laugh. He loved making people laugh with his puns, and he really seemed to embrace life and stay positive. And I will definitely miss seeing him at various events. And it's a sad time, but try and keep the good memories close. It's really, really important to remember and think of those memories, and it'll bring you comfort. My condolences to the family and friends of Joe. He was a really, really, really great person.
So, Dave, I know you missed it, but a few weeks ago we had the 2,000-inch party in Los Angeles, and of course Joe Jaffa was invited, and pretty early on when I was letting him know we were thinking about it. I was letting him know about like when the date range might be, because Joe would be a guest of honor at something like that.
Of course, yeah.
And he wasn't sure if he would be able to make it because he was in and out of the hospital quite a bit at that point. And as it turned out, right before the party, he's like, I'm going to be out of the hospital. And I was like, oh my gosh, so you can go to the party? He said, well, I can go. He's like, but the party's on Monday and I don't get my immune system shot until Tuesday. I don't even know what that means, but basically it meant he would get a shot to boost his immune system. And until he got that shot, he would be extra susceptible to catching anything and it having, a much bigger impact on his body because of a dampened immune system with everything he'd been going through with the treatment. So basically we're like, Joe, we would love you to be there more than anything else, but we would hate for you to get sick. And as it turns out, UHF and I both got sick from the party. I don't know if it was from the party or just from all the travel, that was happening, but that would have been the worst thing ever. So Joe and I talked about after the fact that the next party, not only would he be there, he would also be an Olympic marathon runner by that point. So still holding out hope for that.
And mentioning Los Angeles, it reminded me of a time that I met Joe in Los Angeles. This was back in 2016, July 23rd, 2016, off of the Mandatory World Tour when Weird Al did those shows in the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, man, I would have loved to have been there.
Yeah, well, Joe came out for at least one of those shows, and I remember because this is one of my favorite pictures I have with Joe is I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt that is black with like orange and yellow on it, and Joe was wearing his Amish Paradise shirt, which is also black, orange, and yellow. And I just remember we didn't plan it, but we both showed up, and we were both laughing about how we were wearing shirts out of any shirt that we could have picked that were both black, orange, and yellow. So we have a picture of us laughing together with our shirts.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that.
Let's listen to another message from one of Joe's friends.
Hey, Gil and Chillers. Johnny O'Hearn here. The memories made with Joe are truly a blessing. I'm gutted whenever a fixture of fandom communities is gone too soon. But the knife twists deeper and with a far more jagged blade when it's someone you call not a mere acquaintance, but a true friend. Joe and I were both members of World of Weird Al Yankovic forums, and then nearly 2 decades later actively contributing to this pretty stinking majestic podcast, whether it be through call-ins, intel sent to Dave and Ethan, or just participating in the Facebook group. Our friendship began after I reached out to thank him for an opportunity to attend this digital private function alongside Dave, Ethan, and Jeff. Afterwards, we were talking about rare Weird Al media, connecting on our mutual love of Nintendo, and an animated show that is like my huge special interest. I'm not one to let fandom peers into my more personal world easily. It's easier to talk to me on Discord, unless we've met offline, but Joe had all the green flags in record time, and we were fast friends. A year passes, and as various you had to be there tier memories piled on, there was a fan project outside of Weird Al fandom that was starting to take a toll on me. And when it comes to long-standing and public-facing projects, I get selective about who I would trust with it. When Joe offered to assist and was met with an immediate resounding yes, you know he's the guy for the role, because he had his moderating experience, his background as a teaching aide, but we also practically grew up in Weird Al fan communities. So thanks to the old Weird Al forums, we knew that moderating was more than just upholding rules, but extending grace and patience. This project was for a series that was a magnet for misfits, much like Al's fandom, and it was going to be full of impressionable and rightfully insecure kids trying to figure themselves out. Moderators can't be bullies letting their frustration show easily. You have to resent circumstance before behavior, and behavior before people, especially with kids. Joe understood that in spades. So I have the greater Weird Al community to thank for sparking a wonderful friendship and for an excellent teammate. Whenever the stress of that role got to be too much for me, I remembered how, if I talked to him about it, his own energy would keep me grounded. Otherwise, to borrow a deep-cut Al trope, I'd rather shove a 6-inch railroad spike through my head than deal with that alone, or worse, with someone who doesn't have his heart. Anyways, I scoured through our chat logs for memories, and I know I loved rereading them. One joke he sent, and I never determined if it was a Joe Jaffa spin on a trend or one he found and wisely curated for his friends. But on New Year's morning of 2021, I had went through this horrible dip in my emotional and mental health. He sent the joke without knowing I had been sobbing after an ordeal, and I don't know where my head would have been if he didn't send that, now that I think about it. And it made me laugh both that night and upon rereading yesterday. The joke was about how people just send off holiday well wishes en masse without proofreading or making sure the intended audience gets their own fresh copy. Anyways, the memory of our last conversation is hewn into my mind for the rest of my life, as I wanted him to know that his friendship was a true gift and that he's the bravest, toughest friend I ever had. I take a small bit of comfort knowing his end-of-life care was in peace, surrounded by family, and with him knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt how much we all love him. This man finished his fight against cancer by, quote, taking it down with him. Definitely a trope-savvy outlook for it. What a way to face death. After all, bravery isn't about being foolishly fearless. It's about working with what you know and making that gut-wrenching choice with all the strength and resolve you have left. I don't really expect there to be an afterlife, but if there's something, I hope it's nice, and I hope I can see him there. Somewhere beyond Emo Phillips's cellar door, so there will be wonderful things like trees and grass, somewhere far away from the room next to the noisy ice machine for all eternity, and equipped with the universe's most comfortable couch, engineered by Vortian scientists. If I could ask any who have absolutely no connection to him, consider anything. Please don't rely on cancer to be the only reason you tell someone you love them. Don't soften it with a bro or a man. We all need to hear it more often than we let on. I'm glad I told Joe I love him, and I'm glad that this is a fan community that doesn't turn its nose up at soft, warm, wholesome masculinity. So let's keep that energy up right now. I love you, Dave. I love you, Ethan. And I love you Okay, there's a floor to this. Finally, Joe spent every moment of his life being his authentic self and taking everything life has to offer. He was an inspiring friend, teacher's aide, comedian, and teammate. He was an intelligent, inspiring, strong, and beautiful human being, and he clearly was raised by a terrific family who I'm grateful for their ripple effect on our world. I want to thank you all for your friendship and wish you a happy and fulfilling 2018. You're the best gymnastics group anyone could ask for. Best wishes, Helen.
Well, Dave, luckily I've made up for some of my absences in the California area for Weird Al related events as of late, but I was so bummed to miss out on the Hollywood Bowl, and back in 2009, of course, I missed out on AlFest 2009, which you attended, Joe attended, so many great people attended, and that was in Costa Mesa, California, and it was hosted by Vicky DeVries Rhymes with Cheese. What can you tell me about this AlFest and what you remember of Joe there?
So I do remember Joe being there, and I do remember that the last event of the evening, we did a screening of the movie UHF, but it was not just like any old screening. It was a Rocky Horror style shadow cast.
Oh, man. How cool.
It was a lot of fun. A lot of people played different parts. I played the part of Conan the Librarian. And I remember Joe participated in the shadow cast as well. He played the very, very pivotal role of limo driver.
Wow, a role Joe was born to play. I bet he was the best limo driver. And I bet, and I'm not just saying this, I bet Joe put a lot of time into perfecting being the limo driver. And I bet he kicked butt. Now, Dave, I'm not sure who is supposed to play the limo driver on our reading, albeit not a Rocky Horror style Shadowcast reading, but we do have coming up on Labor Day our script reading of UHF, and Joe was actually scheduled to read a couple parts.
Yeah, that's right. He was going to read the parts of the guide during the Indiana Jones sequence, and the man who shouts, "Look!" and points at the silly face statue thing that's there, right? And he was also going to play the part of Noodles McIntosh, the cameraman.
Two incredible Joe Jaffa parts. He would do so great. And I'm so bummed that we won't have Joe there to read those parts with us, but we do have some very special guests hoping to fill the Joe-shaped hole in the cast reading.
That's right. Joe's cousin, Rob, who we spoke to earlier this episode, let us know that he and his 11-year-old son plan to take over Joe's lines.
What a wonderful tribute to Joe. That is so sweet.
And speaking of wonderful tributes to Joe, let's listen to a few more messages from our friends.
Hello, team. This is UHS. I'm calling to express my condolences for the loss of our friend Joe Jaffa. Jaffa, if you will. Shared a lot of memories of Weird Al shows with him and conventions and messages and all the stuff. It's just hard to imagine that he has left us. You know, like we've all been saying, this is just, it's a tragedy and he was just such a good guy and we're going to miss him tremendously. Joe Jaffa, if you can hear this, get back here, please, if you can. Okay, bye.
Hey guys, it's Jake Larson. Long time no talk. Just wanted to call about Joe. Thinking about him a lot this week, I think, as we all are. I never got to meet him in person. We were hoping to hit a show together or meet up at a show on the upcoming tour. I had a couple of fun game nights. Some of you guys were part of that, and gals. Kept trying to schedule another one, and, you know, it was either my schedule or his. So, miss him already. Gonna miss him more in the future, and really gonna miss him when the tour hits. Gonna miss him. Miss his puns, his posts, comments, chats, and all that stuff. Love you, Joe.
Hey guys, this is Dave Grant, aka Sebastian Shepard, Sheepdogger, all that. I am calling to pay tribute to our dear friend Joe Jaffa, who, if you were ever in a room with him, it was like sitting in a hot tub. He was just so warm and welcoming and comfortable in any space that you were in with him. He was the kind of guy that when you met him, you felt like you've been old friends for a long time, which is why I think so many of us are deeply touched by his passing. I think we all just assumed that he was just going to come through yet another battle, and it's very sad to have lost him. One of the last times I spoke with him, he was through Joe Jaffa. I asked him if he was going to be a part of the UHF script reading that's happening. He said he was going to play Noodles. And I said, I usually don't get invited to these types of things, so I'm really excited about it. And he said, well, I'll make sure that you get invited next time. And that's just who Joe was. He was a welcoming, sweet guy that made sure that everybody felt included. And he will truly, truly be missed. I don't want to make this a plug for anything. I went to Joe Jaffa as the first person I could think of for this project that I'm working on. And he said that he would tell his story, which is such an incredible story, once he made it through this round of chemo. And unfortunately, as we all know, he was not able to write his story. And just wanted you guys to know that we will be dedicating it to Joe and that his story does continue on. I'm not going to mention the name of the project because, again, I don't want this to be about that. I want this to be just really Joe's impact and how much he means to all of us. Dylan, chill in peace, Joe. That's hard to say. It's really hard to say. I miss the guy.
In less than a week, on Tuesday, August 27th, it's going to be the 6-year anniversary of Weird Al getting his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And while I didn't know Joe at the time, technically, I may have met him at the ceremony.
Yeah, that's right. Joe was a big champion for getting Weird Al his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and I know he did attend the star dedication ceremony and the after party at the Viper Room as well.
That is so awesome, and I'm glad, even if I didn't know him, I still was in his presence for such an important and pretty stinking majestic moment in Weird Al history.
All right, let's take a listen to a few more messages from friends of Joe.
Hey, this is Dana B. and Beaker. On a rather somber note, we're very saddened to hear about the passing of our dear Al pal, Joe Jaffa. I believe I first got in touch with Joe through Wowway, the World of Weird Al Yankovic forum back in the day. And while Joe and I never met in person, I always admired his upbeat spirit and enthusiasm and eagerness to connect with other Al pals. And even throughout his battle with cancer, he still had the best upbeat spirit. But now that he's passed on, his memory will always be in our hearts. Rest in polka power, Joe, from Dana and Beaker.
Hey, this is Kev Messick, and I just wanted to hop on and share a little bit about my experience with Joe Jaffa. I never got to know him quite as closely as I would have liked to, but we had many online interactions, and we got to be in a couple of group calls. And I just remember Joe being the type of guy who was willing to be friends with anyone. I understand a lot of his closer friends within the community were from the Wowway forums, but Joe always stood out to me as someone who went out of his way to make conversation and spread his fantastic sense of humor regardless of how long he had known you. Yeah, I wish I had gotten to know him better, but I'm really grateful to have known him at all. I know despite the limited time I got to spend with him, it hit me really hard, so my thoughts and prayers are with all of his loved ones. Thanks, guys.
Hello, my beautiful friends. This is Polyester calling from Toronto, Canada. I am calling to just leave a few words about Joe Jaffa, our amazing friend. He was amazing, funny as hell, put all of us to shame, and just such a joy to be around. I'm so blessed that I got to meet him in 2018 at the Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony, not just there, and then at the VIP party afterwards at the Viper Room. Just being able to chat with him on Facebook, read his comments on posts, and just have a little chuckle, or a huge chuckle really, a huge cackle, here at home or on the subway. I'm just going to remember that fondly. I've been trying to not cry because I'm sad that he's not with us anymore, but he's in our hearts. And that's the main thing. And I know that I'm not the only one who's going to remember him fondly. It'll be just really nice to just have him pop into my head from time to time. And it's sad, but it's also really lovely because he's just the type of guy, just the type of human being that you just like to remember, because he touched all of our hearts. And it took me so long to be able to record the video for his family. Hopefully this will make people laugh, and I hope I wasn't the only one that it took forever. And you know what? I kind of, I'm feeling better right now. You know, I had the little cry there, and it's actually kind of kind of warming my heart right now to think that Joe was like kind of like watching, you know, from the ether going, Jesus, Polly, you don't know how to make a video? What the hell? Come on, get it together, girl. Not like he would talk like that, but you know, I hope he enjoyed me like messing up and fumbling my words. But there you go. I'll stop the rambling and just say that I love Joe. We love Joe. And I'm raising my my mug of Sprite to him. Cheers, everybody. Here's to Joe. Love you lots.
Another memory of Joe we both have is at Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas Live the Film Concert Experience in Los Angeles on Halloween in 2021.
That was such an incredible experience. So if people haven't listened to the episode where we talk all about that, or if you just don't remember, because that was a while ago, there was a small group of us Weird Al fans, including Joe, and we got together and we rented a suite in the stadium so we could not only get a good view of the performance with Al's 30-second cameo, but then we could have a nice get-together and hang out with Weird Al superfans.
And being that it was Halloween, pretty much everybody dressed up, and Joe came dressed as a weasel stomper, complete with a Viking helmet.
And another super memorable part of that night was afterwards, we legitimately accidentally got into the VIP after party.
That's right.
Where not only did we meet Danny Elfman, but we all got a group shot with Weird Al. It was so crazy. And I'm so glad that Joe was there to have that fun with us.
Yeah, it was so great to see Joe there. All right, let's take a listen to a few more messages from our friends.
Hey, Dave, Ethan. Intern Frank doesn't get a hello, even in a situation like this. I'm calling to memorialize our good friend Joe Jaffa. I got to hang out with him 2 nights in October 2021. Once on October 30th, known as the Devil's Night, at Tiki T on Sunset Boulevard, and then the very following night when we saw Weird Al Yankovic perform in Nightmare Before Christmas in a live-to-screen performance. He's a really cool guy. He was quite upset that the tiki bar we were at didn't have any IPAs, but with that aside, I mean, I was really, really fortunate to get to spend a little bit of time with him in the, half a decade that I've been in the Weird Al fan community. We messaged quite a bit, but we only got to hang out those 2 nights. So I'm sending love to all the other members of the Weird Al fan community, and I'm hoping that if there is a better place, that he is now there, and if there is a worse place, that his cancer is now there. All right, Gillen, chill in peace to our friend Joe Jaffa.
Hi, my name is Chris Michaud, and I joined the Dave and Ethan Discord community a couple years ago during the second Vanity Tour. And Joe was one of the first people to really help me feel welcome and included. Such a tight-knit community, and he was one of the first people to really reach out, and had a lot of great conversations with him, got to hang out with him on Zoom a couple of times. But the memory that's going to stick with me forever is when we were talking about the Jackson Park Espresso. We were sharing our opinions about that, and he took a picture of this coffee mug that said Mr. Joe on it. And it was a great mug, and I love a great mug, so I asked him, hey, where did you get that? And he told me it was a gift from one of his students. And it turns out that he taught sort of kindergarten through 3rd grade, depending on the year. And that's a great snapshot of the kind of person that Joe was, the kind of person who was so welcoming and so positive he would inspire a small child to buy him a coffee mug with his name right on it. I am certainly going to miss Joe. I know a lot of us are, but I think he sets a really positive example of the kind of person you should be in any community. Every community needs a Mr. Joe.
Hi, I'm Vicki DeVries, Rhymes with Cheese, here to talk about our friend Joe Jaffa. I first got to know Joe on the World of Weird Al Yankovic forum. I was very impressed with the way he handled himself there with kindness and patience and always a positive thing to say, which was especially unusual because he was only 14 at the time. We got to meet back then when he was that age, when he came up and introduced himself to me at a Weird Al album signing. That was the first of many times I had the pleasure of visiting with Joe at various events over the years. As he became an adult, he continued to refine himself into an even more amazing person, never losing that kind and patient demeanor and becoming all the more gracious and supportive to others as time went by. I loved our chats, his sense of humor, and those puns. I even got to see him try his hand at stand-up, at a Judy Carter comedy workshop. Joe gave us a stellar example of what it is to be an exceptional human being, and I, for one, am going to try to think about him before deciding how to treat others both online and in person. I'm sorry he had to leave so soon. I miss him so much already.
Now, we also got to see Joe on the last Weird Al tour, the unfortunate return of the ridiculously self-indulgent, ill-advised Vanity Tour, about 2 years ago now, back in 2022.
Yeah, so in June of that year, there was a series of 2 concerts at the Wiltern in Los Angeles, and of course, being his hometown concert, Joe was in attendance.
Now, being a big show with a bunch of our friends in attendance, Dave, you and I, and a couple others, we bought VIP tickets. But since Joe was going through some treatments at the time, and he wasn't sure if he would definitely be available on that date, he didn't move forward with picking up a VIP ticket for the show.
But Joe's got some great friends because a small group of us helped pull some strings so Joe could join us in hanging out and meeting Al at the VIP party.
What a great night that was, and I'm so glad that we got to spend that extra time with Joe at a pretty stinking majestic performance.
And now, here's our last group of messages from Joe's friends.
Joe was to me what everything good was about Weird Al's fans. He was nice, funny. Every time I saw him post online, and we were internet friends, it would bring a smile to my face. I do wish I had more opportunity to have talked to Joe, but I'm glad that the interactions that we did have happened at all. One time I messaged him out of the blue, just a picture from my favorite cartoon, Home Movies, and he said that he really liked that show, and homie was cool. Joe had no idea who I was, and he still accepted me as a friend. That is the power of freaking internet, man. Is you could just reach out and just become friends with somebody that you've never even met before. And he was nothing but positive and accepting, man. He is the exact type of freaking person that everyone should strive to be. See, I never even met him in person, but I miss him.
Hey gang, this is Jackie Rossi. I'm in my car recording this because I don't really know what to say. I remember when Joe joined the forum, and I remember him being sick, like, when he was really young. I didn't know Joe particularly well. We played a lot of Pokemon Go together. Like, I gave him a Lapras at the Viper Room, which is a really weird collection of things to say, but that Lapras showed up on my couch one day. I caught it. I gave it to him because he somehow didn't have one yet. And then we fought the gym, and we were the kings of the Viper Room, which also doesn't exist anymore. So I'm really sad that he is no longer with us. He was a really great kid, and I wish I kind of knew him better. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye.
Hey, Dave and Ethan. It's your old pal, Devlin Wilder. You know, there's no fandom friendlier than the Weird Al fandom, and no one has ever exemplified that kindness more than our pal, Joe Jaffa. We had a number of chats over the years and even caught up in person a time or two, including with a group of fellow Weird Al fans prior to a screening of Weird the Al Yankovic Story. He always had a smile to share and was always the most jovial person I'd ever met, even while he was going through chemo. He and I would raid Pokemon while he was in the hospital, and he was just as masterful a Pokemon trainer as he was a Weird Al fan, and even more so, masterful of a friend. We lifted each other up and gave each other strength in hard times. He will truly be forever missed.
Hi, this is Adrian Vasquez, and I just wanted to say a few words about Joe Jaffa. I'm proud to have been able to call him a friend for the past 20 years or so, and I still remember meeting him in person for the first time about 13 years or so ago and having Joe make it feel like we'd been old friends forever. One of the best memories of that trip out to California for my wife Ann and I was hopping up on the karaoke stage with a bunch of other fellow Weird Al fans and singing The Saga Begins. And as I watched the video back of that recently and saw us sharing the mic with Joe, I was just flooded with emotion. Happy to have shared that moment with Joe and a lot of other great laughs and conversations over the years, but sad that we won't be able to meet up with him the next time we're out in California again. Then I thought that Joe would probably pick that moment to drop a wonderfully terrible pun on me to keep things light, because Joe is just, a tremendously funny guy, but also just a great all-around human being. Whenever I hear a pun, I know I'll always think of Joe.
Hey, Joe. It's Kenneth. Just got a call from Ethan letting me know that you've gone up to the spirit in the sky. It was kind of hard to hear. Thank you for all the wonderful talks and all the times that we got to see you at Al concerts, at the LA premiere of Weird at the Aero Theater. Thank you for your friendship and your smiles. You can visit me in my dreams anytime. You're always welcome. Goodbye.
Now, Joe, of course, was a huge fan of David Ethan's 2008 Weird Al podcast, contributing in many ways over the years.
We cannot thank him enough for endlessly providing us with Weird Al related beer reviews and keeping us current by sharing Weird Al related news that he came across to us directly and to our Facebook group.
Yeah, and Joe is actually a moderator, a great moderator on our Discord channel, making many improvements to the channel and keeping the conversations light and fun.
And I remember over the pandemic, we set up a couple game nights with friends of the podcast and listeners. And we really wanted to play Jackbox, but we really just couldn't figure out how to share it with everyone. But leave it to Joe Jaffa. He figured it out. He hosted it on a Twitch channel, and that was like one of the most memorable ones. That was so much fun. I just absolutely love that we got to share those game nights with Joe.
Yeah, those game nights were a lot of fun, and Joe was always very enthusiastic about them.
So kind of as we mentioned, Joe had called the 347 Spatula hotline many times over the years. You know, the beer reviews, he shared some Gosners and, just wishing the podcast and us well and sharing some funny stories. Well, we pulled two of our favorite Joe Jaffa calls. So without further ado, let's take a listen.
Hey, Dave. Hey, Ethan. Hey, Frank. Joe Jaffa here. I've been listening to the Centimeter episodes, and you guys talk a lot about overanalyzing song lyrics. Well, I want to tell you my family's personal story about overanalyzing a song lyric. It was 2003, and Poodle Hat had just come out. We listened to it a lot. One thing we often debated and talked about was, in a complicated song, who is Al singing the first verse to when he sings Pizza Party at Your House? We talked about it a lot and debated. Some of us said he's singing to a girl. Some of us said he's singing to a guy. My dad said he's singing to Avril Lavigne, specifically. So at the end of the summer, we found ourselves backstage at the concert at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles. We were talking to Al and asking him questions, and he was asking about my health and how I was doing. And as we were about to leave, Al said, "Is there anything else you want to ask me?" And my sister thought about it and jumped right into it, and asked Al, "Who are you singing to when you sing Pizza Party at Your House?" And Al said, I guess a friend. And we said, more specifically, please. And he said, a friend who really likes pizza. And we said, no, okay, boy or girl. And he said, boy, I guess. So that goes to show how we took the song lyric that Al thought of as more of a throwaway and analyzed the hell out of it. Thanks, guys. Talk soon. Bye. Dave and Ethan, Joe Jaffa here. Listening to your Polka Party Top 5 definitive list reminded me of this personal living with a hernia story. Some of your listeners may know this from stories I've told either in person or on Huawei over the years, but when I was 4 or so, I had a hernia surgery. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Gwinnell, but don't hold me to that. Years later, I was listening to Polka Party with my friend Brett, and the song came on. We must have been in 2nd or 3rd grade. He said something to the effect of how weird of a song topic it was, and I told him that, well, I used to live with a hernia myself. He looked at me completely stunned and asked, "Where did he sleep?" I replied, here, and pointed to the area of my body where a hernia would be. "What?" Brett exclaimed. I explained to him what a hernia was as best an 8-year-old could. Oh. Turns out he thought hernia was a term for a homeless person. Years later, when we were in our 20s, I brought up the story, and he said it was because of the homeless guy on the album cover. I questioned this again, and he got his albums crossed and thought Mr. Frump on the cover of the self-titled album was a homeless person living in Al's room. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
This episode, we're going to skip some of the normal features of Dave and Ethan's 2000 Inch Weird Al podcast that tend to be fan favorites, like the ads and us reading a bunch of credits at the end for the podcast.
Now, each week, we like to thank those who contribute over at patreon.com/2000inch. But this week, we want to thank someone who not only supported us each month on Patreon, he also supported us by contributing to our Indiegogo campaign that we launched ahead of the first episode of the podcast. Yes, you may have guessed, that is Joe Jaffa. What a guy, Joe Jaffa.
If you missed the opportunity to share a video or a message for Joe's family, please feel free to call 347-SPATULA, that's 347-772-8852, and we will make sure your message is passed along to his family.
And if you'd like to listen to Rob Kutner's original episode that we recorded with him, you can head over to 2000inch.com or weirdalpodcast.com to find his interview on episode 201 Inch.
And speaking of Rob, thank you once again to Rob Kutner for joining us this episode. We'd also like to thank Serge Breda, Spencer Parks, Mike Minnick, Will King, Alexis Corrigan, Devlin Wildler, Johnny O'Hearn, David Grant, Polyester, Vicky DeVries, Rhymes with Cheese, UH Jeff Nucera, Chris Michaud, our very own Jackson Scoggins, Dana B. and Beaker, Kev Messick, Jake Larson, Kenneth Gwinnett, Adrian Vasquez, Eve B., Jackie Rossi, our very own Claire Walsh, everyone who shared video messages on Joy Cards for Joe's family, everyone who shared memories of Joe on our Facebook group, Discord, or elsewhere, and of course, the irreplaceable Joe Jaffa.
Thank you to the Grammy Award-winning Jim Kimo West for our incredible podcast theme song, and thank you to Weird Al Yankovic for the years of love, laughs, and support for Joe Jaffa. And also, this podcast probably would not exist without him. And a big thanks to all of you, our loyal listeners, subscribers, incredible sponsors, Burrito, Wizard Burger, our very own Jackson Scoggins, and Discover Darwin, plus everyone in our Patreon family, with special thanks to our very own close personal friend level Patreon supporters, and everyone else who makes our podcast possible.
Thank you for choosing Dave and Ethan's 2000 Inch Weird Al podcast. And until next time, remember to gill and chill, keep listening to Weird Al, and stay cheesy.
There was only one time we ever disagreed with Joe Jaffa. Let's take a listen.
Hey Dave and Ethan, Joe Jaffa here, calling to say congrats on 200 episodes. Here's to the next 1,800 inches. Enjoy the day, enjoy the achievement, maybe even be nice and let Frank out of his cage for about 27 seconds, as he deserves to celebrate a bit too.
Sorry, Joe. We love you, but no way are we letting intern Frank out of his cage ever. Not even for 27 seconds.
That was Dave and Ethan's 2000 Inch Weird Al podcast, episode 240 Inch.
We miss you, Joe.
Mary had a little lamb.